My audio. Hey, Will.
Hey, how's it going?
Going? Good. He's coming through there, but yeah. So you getting any like slap back from our speakers, like any delay or anything weird?
No, it sounds great so far. I can't hear any echo.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Sweetness. Oh, I will. Let me see if I can get on video. Start video. All right. Hey, Will. Is this Cordaro?
Hey,
The
Cordaro.
guy
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So he plays keys for me, and I've been telling him a lot about you. And so I feel like in some ways, Cordero's a great keys player. He understands a lot of stuff, but he hasn't worked with Ableton a ton. And so in some ways, I almost just want to turn it over to maybe have, like, Cordero tell you what he needs or wants to do, and
Yeah.
we'll just keep going from there.
Yeah,
Does that sound good, man?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
So Cordaro, I haven't had a lot of experience with Ableton outside of playing with the church.
Mhm.
And the current setup we have is just like we have an instrument assigned to each little key on this limited controller that we have.
Mhm.
So I guess what we're trying to do now is I guess I would like to be able to set up how would I say this? So I have a section for like key sounds that I can kind of just go in between, but without there being any kind of like snag or if the audio kind of like you can hear the switch in the audio. I was trying to avoid that.
Okay.
And then I guess the way that we have it set up right now is every instrument is on a different key, and I don't. Do you know of any, like, what's a better way to do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the cool thing, both the cool and bad thing about Ableton is there's a gazillion ways to do stuff. And so part of what Matthew and I have been talking about is I'll try to steer you guys the way I think is the best, or not necessarily the best, but maybe the most efficient. But again, sometimes with doing something one way, might affect something else. And for you, the way you play, you might want to do it this way. That may not be the most quote unquote efficient, but it does what you need to do. So, yeah. And I think, again, the cool thing, we can do whatever. So I think what would help is kind of diving in and going, okay, based on, I heard you say hearing it switch between sounds. So, using instrument racks, which I think we've switched to, helps solve that. The big problem, though, between doing it that way and what you guys were doing before is if you go and switch from, one pad sound to another one, depending on the type of sound and depending on how you do it, you will hear the switch. The nice thing, though, is as you sustain those notes out, it's not going to switch till you get to the next sound, if that makes sense. So there might be some tweaks, optimizations in that might help as we're looking at this. But and Matthew, just a question for you. From the stuff we were looking at before, how much of that have you guys moved to, and kind of where's the like? Yeah, I want to make sure I know.
Yeah, so we actually haven't like fully utilized this computer or this setup yet.
Okay.
I've been working with Cordaro to choose some sounds.
Okay, cool.
And so yeah, I mean, in terms of that, like the instrument rack we have for keys, he's loved that. Like, loves the sound. It feels like it switches really easy. But in some ways, I feel like it might be helpful maybe to show him how to set up an instrument rack for some pads. We pulled out a bunch of pad sounds that we were like combing through, and I've like made those all I essentially like separate external instruments, just kind of how we had before, where they're just grouped together in one giant group. And then I was just turning a monitor on and off to show him different sounds. But I feel like probably would be cool just to show him how we would set up an instrument rack and what that would work, because I feel like the instrument racks of like switching sounds together is something he's going to want to do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's do this. Let me share my screen, and And Cordaro, at any point, just well, I may lose you for a second, so I may not see you, but just start hooting and hollering, and I'll hear you. Feel free to interrupt at any point. And I'm recording it too, so thankfully you'll be able to go back and reference it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
All right, so let me screen share. Give me 1 second here. Share screen. Share computer set on. All right. So can you see my Ableton session there?
Yeah, in low resolution. Oh,
okay.
That's better.
Cool. There we go.
Good now.
Perfect. Cool. So, let's again step back, go to ground zero, start at kind of the starting place. Talk through what an instrument rack is and why to do it. And it's kind of, when Matthew and I first started this, and he showed me the setup you guys had. And there's a lot of good stuff about that, to be able to have a button and it says, this is this sound, that is that sound. That's a really straightforward thing to do, which is cool. Moving to instrument racks is really beneficial because it's going to help your CPU as opposed to everything, just being on at once. That's going to help it. And then the basic idea of what you guys have been working towards, which is this idea of splitting sounds up by type of sound. So here's my pianos. Here's my synth stuff. Here's my guitar stuff. Or, guitar doesn't apply here, but pads, synth, arpeggiator stuff. Trying to separate by types of sounds, I think, helps. And it's almost putting, the benefit of digital stuff, the benefit of Ableton is you can do whatever. The downside to that is sometimes in the ability to do whatever, you get lost. Or you get kind of like, man, this is great. Actually, one second. We do this so I don't start getting lit up with text messages here. I should do that. There we go. The downside to that is no limitations. Sometimes is like I have no idea where to go. So if you could force yourself into the limitation of an instrument rack is an individual type of sound, then it's going to give you some clarity and some like mental. It's the places where you get to your house and you're organizing. This goes in this drawer, that goes in that drawer. That's kind of what we're trying to do with instrument racks.
Gotcha.
So,
just a quick question.
Yes.
Do you have any familiarity with FL Studio?
It's been a very, very long time since I've used it, and when I used it, it was Fruity Loops. Like that was, before they made the transition. So, is that what you're used to using?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's if any point you see there's any good analogies that might help me understand some of the concepts. If you knew anything from that could help, but if not, no worries. I can try to.
Yeah, and again, at any point, go. I'm kind of lost here, or is this like that? And one thing I'll say, and this might help. So, in a typical DAW, and I know FL Studio, it's kind of like it's like great sounds plus recording, and plus it's kind of everything in one. Ableton is a little more bare bones. It does have some good sounds, but you kind of have to work at it a little bit. They're doing better with 510. It's a little better. But so one of the concepts, and I can't remember, does FL Studio have sends and return tracks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the basic concept of sends and return tracks or bus tracks or groups or whatever is I take different types of sounds and group them, right? And so, for instance, looking here, I have kick, I have snare, I have toms, right? What I could do in live is I could take these, I could group them, and then I now call this drums, okay? So that's one way to do this. Now, what I could do, actually, let's go back to that as drums. So if I want to add a reverb to all the drums, and I'm going to go a little off track for a second to tee up instrument racks, I think a little better. I could put a reverb on this, actually there's a reverb, I forgot by the default, on this return track. So over here on the right is my return track. So that's my reverb. And then what I could do is go to the sends knob here and turn that up. And again, that basically means I'm going to take these drums, I'm going to send them to that return track that the reverb's going to hit, and then the reverb audio, the affected drum sound is going to come out of here, right? So I could group them. I could use sends and returns. The other thing I could do is I could just take this reverb and drop it right here on the drums, right? And that's going to work. Okay, kind of same concept. The difference is if you know there's sends and returns, and then there's inserts. And an insert is when you insert it, literally in the chain. Back in the analog days in the studio, you would literally take your cable, come out of this preamp into this effect over here, and you're inserting that into the chain. So what an instrument rack does, while both of these are really effective at doing what they're doing, and let's again back up before you even get to instrument rack. What I could do is if I'm just working in live here, and I could say this is a pad sound, right? This is let's get just a synth key sound. I don't know that if this.
And just curious, what we're looking at right now, this is like the mixer.
So yeah, let me take you. And actually, this is good question. Let's back up even a step further. So the nice thing about Ableton is there's basically two views. There's a few extra places, but unlike Logic, Pro Tools, and I can't remember how FL Studio is, it's not like there's an edit view where you hit a keyboard shortcut that hit edit. It's not like there's a mix view where you go here to mix. There's two basic views. So the basic idea is you get this view here, which is called session view, and our tracks go top to bottom, right? They're vertical. If you hit tab on your computer, then you go into arrangement view. And arrangement view, our tracks are horizontal. So the best way to think about this is in some ways, they're the same thing. So for instance, I can go here and I can adjust the volume on this track, okay? So I'm just moving that fader. That, looks very analog, like a weird kind of analog, but there's a fader there. Now, alternatively, I could go over into arrangement view here. Again, tracks are horizontal. And I can select to pull up the mixer, choose track volume, and I can automate the track volume here. So, right, you could see that this is more for a quick change, but now I automated this. And if I press play, we'll see that fader move because I made that automation, okay?
Gotcha.
So arrangement view is very linear. It's just like Pro Tools. It's just like Logic. Anything where you basically start with the intro, then you record the verse, and the chorus, and the bridge, so on and so forth. Session view is kind of unique. So we do have our tracks. We have what's called scenes, and then we have clips within scenes. So right where a track and a scene intersect, that's a clip. So I can double click to create an empty clip. And then this is scene 1. This is our master track over here. This is scene 1, scene 2, and scene 3. Now, when it comes to running tracks live, running multi-tracks or stem content, and playing to that, typically arrangement view is the best place to start for that because it is pretty linear. I can still jump around. I can still repeat stuff, which is super, super easy over in the arrangement view. But basically, if I have this kind of preset structure, I'm starting over here. Now, in session view, what's cool, though, is I can have these scenes, and these scenes can basically function in two ways. They can be songs in a set list. They can be sections of a song. Now, we can kind of tweak that for what we're doing for keys, which we'll see here in a second. But basically, I can say this scene is song 1, right? And let's rename it song 2, song 3. So I'm treating each one of these as separate scenes. Now what's cool is I can, again, double click to create a couple clips here. And when I launch this scene, song 2, it's going to play that clip, okay? So it's going to play the clip that's in this track here. When I launch this one, it's going to play all 3 of those. So if we start to think, okay, I'm separating my sounds by type of sound. And what we're going to do is we're going to use MIDI clips to do something in our instrument rack that's going to basically call up sounds. And this is probably a bit of what you've been getting into and using and doing, right? Mm-hmm. But what we're going to do is use these clips kind of in a unique way. In session view, for me personally, when I'm doing key stuff, and I am 100% not a piano player. I would maybe call myself a keys player in the sense of I can play pads, I can play some synth stuff. I don't have keys chops whatsoever, but I can pull up a good sound. I can get by in a worship service easily. But I prefer session view for key stuff because you can kind of tweak it to where you can do whatever you want to, but you have control over each of these clips. You kind of see all your, it's almost like taking, I don't know, do you play any hardware keyboards at all, like a Motif or a Nord or anything like that?
Roland.
Roland, okay, so it's like a Phantom or something. It's basically, you take the LCD screen, you flip it up, but now you have this exploded view where you can get to all your presets, you can get to all your banks. that's essentially what I really like about session view for key stuff is I see it kind of in that way. Okay. So, now if we go back to this, let's treat Ableton a bit like FL Studio or any normal DAW. So typically what we're going to end up doing, and again, I'm just going to grab some sounds here. I'm just loading sounds, you're finding sounds. And over here on the left is what's called our browser. So you can access that using this show hide button in the upper left-hand corner. So that's going to basically show you sounds, plugins, if you're using Omnisphere, which I think you guys are. Any plugin, you can get to it from the plugins browser here. But this is where you go to access sounds built into Live, which you can find under Instruments, Audio Effects, MIDI Effects. When you get into running stems in Live, you can open Live sets, drag them from there. This is like one of the key things to working with Live is learning the browser. And it's super easy. So for instance, let's find delay. I'm not sure what delay is, but I'm going to go up, search for delay. Well, I know it's audio effects. So there gives me delay, so I can hit enter, go down and say, let's add a simple delay, hit enter, and it adds it to this track. So that's just a way to...
Oh, okay, at the bottom is where they get at. Okay, right.
That's right. Yeah, so now at the bottom here, just like you're saying, so I go through the browser. Let me pull up one other sound just so we have something a little different, and then we'll talk about what's at the bottom. Okay, so these guys, these are our tracks, right? I'm going to delete this instrument rack for a second. These are our tracks. So we have a pad, this one, this other pad sound, and like a key sound. Now, on each track, if we go down here to the bottom, we have this bottom area. This area basically is two views, okay? So when we're dealing with a MIDI track, we have this view, which you see it says no clip selected. So I'm going to double click and create a clip. And now you see the equivalent of the piano roll in FL Studio down here. So this is where I can go in and I can add MIDI notes. I can go in and do some of the stuff we're going to do here in a second with our instrument rack. But this is my clip view, right? It allows me to see information. This is the note editor. I can press E down here to see envelopes, which we'll get to in a second. All the fun stuff. Now, if I press, and you remember, down here earlier was the instrument. The instrument's gone now. At least it seems like it's gone. But if we hit Shift-Tab, that's going to show us the instrument. So there's two ways to think. So down here, and for some reason I'm blanking right now on this whole, okay, so this is our device browser right here. And I'll show you what I opened in just a second. I don't know why I'm having a brain fart. But down at the bottom here is kind of, hold on one second. I don't know why I can't remember that. So we go between device view, which shows us the device loaded on the MIDI track or audio track. So again, you saw it happen. Let's add delay. Delay is going to add after the instrument. And this is just a, mellow piano kind of key sound thing. And I added a delay after it. So this is device view. Now when I press Shift-Tab, that's going to take me again over to the note editor, to the piano roll here. I can open the envelopes. But they're housed on the same track. So one of the things, kind of the Live has a specific worldview. Instead of going and opening an editor window, instead of going and opening piano roll, it's kind of in one, right? It's this one kind of compact thing. So that's why it's really important to know about the show hide buttons. So down here, that's going to open a detail view. There we go. I was blanking the whole time. So this is going to show or hide detail view, which is this whole bottom part. A part of detail view is the two views. If we're on an audio track, then we see a clip. If we're on a MIDI track, then we see the note editor, and then we can choose what we see here. And then again, Shift-Tab is the way to switch those, where we then see devices. And we can have devices on an audio track. Let's create an audio track here real quick. And I can say, if I wanted to, I have a mic set up, and I could put a grain delay on that, which is a type of delay effect. And that's my audio device, right? On MIDI, I have an instrument, and then I have a delay after it. And again, there's my device browser, so I see the device. And then there's the note editor. Those are both a part of device view. Now, one thing let me show you, and this is key in working with Live, and I call this the most important place in Live. And it's beneficial, too, when it's 4 p.m. in the afternoon, your brain is melted, and you can't remember what this thing is called. Over here is called Info View. So Info View is a part of Device View, or excuse me, Detail View. So the cool thing, detail view is this massive thing. Over here to the left, if you press this button, this show hide button, that's going to show or hide what's called info view. The benefit to that is you're learning Ableton, you're not sure what this button is. So you put your mouse over that, and it's going to tell you in the bottom left-hand corner,
Gotcha.
activate this button, blah, blah, blah. My favorite thing about this is if there's a keyboard shortcut, like this guy. I'm not sure what this is. I go up in the, put my mouse over it, it's going to tell me follow. And then it's going to say keyboard shortcut, Command-Shift-F is going to enable that. So now that's how you start to learn keyboard shortcuts. That's how you start to learn the interface, kind of the lay of the land. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cool. So just to make sure I understand, so at the top we have going across, those are just like, I guess in FL Studio, those would be like the channels. So and there can be MIDI, they can be or audio files, right?
Yep, we can have MIDI or audio tracks, that's right. Okay,
and then so each of those little small rectangles underneath it, those are clips.
Those are clips.
And a clip can contain, it contains only for that particular instrument the data. So for example, it could be MIDI data in there, or it could be, can you put multiple audio clips in one track?
Yes, so here's a perfect, when I teach like an Ableton Live 101, here's one of the basics of this. So let me, and this is going to be awful because I'm just doing it right on the spot here, but let me just record something really quick.
Okay.
And I'm just going to record this part. Oop. Actually, it helps when I hit record.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oop. Move out of the way. So for this guy to go away. There we go. Okay, here we go. So there's that part. Now I'm going to go to this next clip down here, and then let's just record this. Okay, so now to answer your question, in this track, and the sound for this track, if you will, is this mellow piano, this keys thing. I've got a delay deal going. And then I recorded this first part. Maybe we call this intro. And then the next section, maybe we call this the verse or whatever. There's two clips, right? Two parts that I recorded. Here's the key to this, though, is within this track, I can't have those two clips playing at the same time. And you may, as I'm doing it, you may already pick it up. So I can go up and do this. Right? As soon as I do this, though, it stops the previous one.
Oh, wow.
So in order for me to get them to play at the same time, I have to do two things. One, I can duplicate the track. And this is going to sound awful, but we'll do it. And I'm going to put them in the same row, the same scene. And when I trigger it now, right, they're both playing at the same time. Doesn't sound good, but that's how we can do that. So, yeah, so that's one of those key things. You can have multiple clips. You can have multiple parts for one track, one type of sound, but you can only play one of them at a single time.
Wow, that's so different. Okay.
Yeah. So, and the way to think about this, so we've got a couple sounds here pulled up, right? We got this Rhodes sound, and then let's hear what this other. This is just a pad thing, right? Kind of a crazy sound and pad sound. But when you're approaching live from a recording standpoint or just basic DAW standpoint, most of what you're going to do is pull up tracks just like this and just go, what sound is this? Okay, there's a bass sound. It's a crazy, awful sound. Pad sound. Right, not bad, pretty cool. And then here's my key sound. Okay. As I listen to each of those, from a recording standpoint, what I'm probably going to do, I might go and record each song at a separate time. So if I'm going in and just doing a normal recording session, right, I would turn click on and I would record my part. Okay. And then when I play it back, and this is one thing, if you ever get into this situation, and I don't know if you could see this with the connection, but you see how these clips are kind of gray? Like they don't look like they should. Up here, this button's key to working with live and understanding the two views. So Ableton, the company, said, you know, we're going to have this world view where instead of all these separate windows, we basically, it's all in one box. It's one thing. But you need to know, am I listening to session view? Am I listening to the clips I recorded over here? Or am I listening to arrangement view? So the key here is if you do anything in arrangement view, or excuse me, if you do anything in session view, like play a scene or record to a scene, that's going to override what's in arrangement view. So the way to get back to arrangement is you press this orange button here. If you ever see that and it's gray and like you're starting the service and you press play and you don't hear your tracks, then you look immediately up there, okay, back to arrangement. I disable it and now I play it. Right, there's my keys part that's recording. So this is kind of the typical recording linear, whereas this is very much like a modular, I do it in chunks. And the benefit of this, it's a great tool as a songwriter, right? To be able to sit down and go, instead of having to record very linearly, and instead of going intro verse chorus, here, I could start with the ending if I want to, and then move the bits around and move the pieces around, which is kind of
Gotcha.
So approaching this though, again, from like the standard, I'm in the studio, I'm producing something, I'm recording something. What I'm gonna do is find sounds I like, okay? And then I'm going to want to layer them. So I want to do a pad and I want to do this together. So what we typically would do is go over here and hold command so that we can arm multiple ones at once. And now I have an awful sound. Let's use this one. Not a good demo for built-in sounds in the live, but we'll just really quickly, let's get this pad to something, or this sound rather, to something that's usable. So let's do a reverb, just add some space to it. And one thing you'll notice too, what Live's instruments do not, like, they're not this all-in-one thing. They kind of have the thing that generates sound, and then you add effects after it, which I think is the thing that throws people off some. Like, they just want to load this thing and have all the sounds there in one. And you have that in Live through instrument racks, which we'll see here in a second. But the instrument itself is kind of this separate, it's one piece of the puzzle, right? And then I can add reverb and I can add filter so that I get to
So
like
with that, so you at the bottom there, you put an instrument, like you load an instrument,
Yep.
then you put an effect after it. What is the difference between doing that and adding the, like, so for example, you add a reverb after this instrument.
Yep.
What's the like? Is there any difference in adding the reverb on a return or something, or directly on that track? Does it do anything different?
Yeah, it does. And this is from a sound design perspective, from a hearing the sound in your head and figuring out how to capture it. Kind of getting this concept is really key. So there's two types of ways to process sound. One is what's called serial processing, and serial just means in chains, right? It means
One after the other.
I triggered Siri when I said serial. So when you have your overdrive and you go to delay, reverb, that's one after the other. That's an insert effect. So if you remember earlier, we patched the chain through it. A return effect is basically what's called parallel processing. So you have the original signal. You always hear the original signal. You hear the original signal plus some effects, and then you blend them together. So the practical way to do this, let's listen to, right here's my pad sound. I'm using serial processing. Now let's put it on this return chain. So I'm going to do, and one thing I like about Live is it's not like when I choose an audio track, I just create a stereo audio track. I don't have to say, would you like a return track? Would you like this? Would you like, it just does it. Same thing with reverb. So I can just take my reverb, drop it right on the return track. So here's the difference. Let's take this reverb, let's turn the send knob up, and now let's play the sound. And here's it. Okay. And then if I bring this down a little, and let's open the filter, it'll be a little more dramatic with the filter open. Right? And then I can bring this down a little more. And you start to hear the reverb's kind of a like supplement to it. I still hear the initial sound, which is this, which in some cases you might want. In this case, though, I want to, and this is the way I think about it. In this case, I want the reverb to affect the sound. I don't want to hear the original sound.
Right.
I got the reverb all the way up, right? So now, even just with this, with the filter on, that's the difference in the sound. I get this wide kind of pad sound as opposed to the synth sound with reverb in the back. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. So it's like before, like you process the sound before it goes to the mixer track thing, in a sense.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm using, and that's the way I think, you can use reverb to make it sound like it's in a room, or you can use reverb to affect it and make it sound wide. And so in this case, I'm putting it in the chain. I'm processing it serially. And I want to lose the original sound. Now, what I could do, I could take the dry wet here, and I could bring this back, right? So I get kind of a similar deal, but I don't always have the original signal at 100% with it.
Right. Okay. This is starting to seem familiar to me now.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's put this auto filter on here. So we have this, right, kind of the intermission pad, kind of add. I want to add this key sound in. So the way to do this when we're recording in the studio, I would record enable both of these, and then let's bring this guy down a little. And now we have this. Right, I'm playing both of these at the same time. And I'm treating them as different channels. I'm, doing all that. That works when I'm in the studio. I can reach up, I can change levels. I could bring the dry wet down a little, maybe increase a little feedback here. And that works, right? We're in the studio, we're recording, we kind of do it, and we move on to the next track. But in a live situation, with a couple problems with this. One, in a live situation, you're finicking, it gets a little finicky doing the record buttons. It's nice, you guys have a great controller in order to do that. But it's a bit of like, I want this, I want that. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I kind of call it, it's the difference between some people when they cook, they got their recipe and they know I need exactly this much, I need exactly that. Some people just kind of on the fly want a little of this, a little of that, and that gets them to the end result. The downside to this, just this pure approach right here, is I'm using, this effect operator, or this instrument rather, which is built into Live Suite, this reverb and this filter, but I'm not treating, if my worship leader turns around, he's not going to say, all right, give me an operator with reverb and filter. He can say, play a pad sound. So I want to treat this as one sound, okay? So this is where we start to get into instrument rack. So I have these individual pieces. I want to make them an instrument. So what I can do is click on this guy, and I'm going to scroll over. I'm going to hold shift, okay? And then there's two ways to do this. I'll show you the kind of slowest way first. I can right click or control click and do group, but you also see this shortcut that shows up there, Command G. So if I do this, watch what happens now. It's going to fold all those into an instrument rack, and it kind of looks the same now. But what I could do is press this show hide devices here. Now all that disappears, and I have this one little device. And now when I play it, let's just go back to just this guy for a second. Now everything is just in that one device. So the basic building blocks of an instrument rack, we have on off. So if I turn that off, right, I turn my device off. I'm not passing any MIDI to it. And then I have this guy, macro control. Let's close this down. So you see I have 8 macros here. I haven't assigned them yet, but I'll show you how easy it is to do that. This is one of my favorite things because it makes instruments really playable. It makes them really expressive. I assign the stuff I need to.
One second. So I guess I didn't completely understand what just was accomplished. So before you had 2 tracks, you had the pad sound and you had the MK, the mellow sound. Yep. You were playing both of them at the same time, right?
Yep, that's right.
And but it seems like you only collapse into a group, only the sounds on the pad sound.
That's right. So
what was I guess I didn't see what was the benefit of collapsing them if I mean they were all there.
Yep.
It looks like I guess I'm saying it just looked like a cosmetic thing.
Yeah. So let me back up one step, and I'll come back to. I left the road sound separate for a second, and we'll come back and make that a part of it. But let me show you the practical reason why I did that. So again, Matthew turns around and says, give me a great pad sound. You don't have this. You need to load this in. So what I can't do in live is go up here and say, save track sounds and save it, right? But what I can do is I can go to individual devices and save it. So let's save our operator and we say great pad sound, right? But we have the reverb, so I'm going to save the reverb. So I'm going to do great pad sound reverb.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, I'm over exaggerating, but you're already getting it. Auto filter, okay, I got to save that. So I'm going to save auto filter, great pad sound, auto filter, right? So in doing that, I saved those 3 sounds, but I can't, in order to recall that, I've literally got to go in and go, okay, presets, I had an instrument. Let's see, this was operator. There's great pad sound, so let me drag this in. And then I had some, what was it, audio effects. Okay, so I've got an auto filter, great pad sound, auto filter. There's that, right? So I saved the individual building blocks, but we want to treat those building blocks as one sound. So one of the benefits of instrument racks, basically think of instrument racks as a wrapper. It's going to take your sounds, it's going to wrap them and put them into one package.
Okay.
And the benefit, and there's a couple things that helps with. One, it helps as a programming tool, which we'll get to here in a second. We're going to wait on that for a second. But it helps from a sound design perspective. And again, instead of treating this as this sound generation, this reverb audio effect, and this great, and this auto filter, right, and saving them separate, I'm going to select them all. I'm going to group them. And now I'm going to do great pad, right? And let's just save this temporarily. And now Matthew turns around and says, hey, I need a great pad sound. And you go, oh, perfect. I've got just the great pad sound. Pull this guy over, you arm it, and now you've got those 3 together, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And just a quick question with that. In that one track, can you have multiple instruments?
You can. So hold that thought for just 1 second.
Gotcha.
And let's bring the Rhodes back in. Let me take you through just a couple more basic building blocks of instrument racks, and then we'll start to combine it. And you're asking the right questions, so you're heading right down the right path, which is awesome. So great pad, we have on-off for our instrument rack. We have this guy, which is going to, basically we talked about these show hide buttons earlier, so I could show hide the browser. I also have show hide buttons per device. So again, I can turn on and off. I can show or hide the macros, which are here. I can show or hide the chain list. And we don't, we're going to deal with this here in a second. The question you asked is going to prompt us to that. But right now I just have one chain. So I have this big instrument rack. I have one chain. You can think of chains as layers. You can think of chains as presets, and we're going to look at them in different ways here in a second. But within each chain is a set of devices, okay? So this last button here is our device browser. So what you can see, macros, I'm going to hide macros. We get this little teeny tiny instrument rack. Then I can show the chain or the layer, right, or preset, depending on how I have it set up. And then I can show the devices that are in that chain. So when I do devices, you'll see, okay, I've got great pad sound, a reverb, and an auto filter, all on this one chain that are part of this instrument rack. So again, instrument racks is a sound design tool. Think of chains as layers, right? I have this sound, I'm going to layer it with this. And kind of, you're probably already skipping ahead, but the Rhodes sound, when I want to bring that Rhodes sound into here, I'm going to bring it in as a separate chain so that it's layered together. But we can also do, and this is a bit of what you've been experimenting with, I can set up an instrument rack so that I have different presets in one instrument rack, and I have separate chains so that when I press a MIDI clip, it pulls up that chain and pulls up that sound. So show you one more cool thing. We won't go too far down this path, but a kind of basic building block for me, again, instead of having to drill into all this, instead of having multiple views, again, kind of back to that world view, that point of view that Live has, I want to make it to where some of the controls I'm most often going to use are just assigned up here to the macros. So let's assign, and actually I'll turn this filter off here so just have auto filter. I'm going to assign this dry wet for the reverb to one of the macros. So I can right click on it and you'll see map to macro 1 all the way to macro 8. I'm going to choose map to macro 8. And now that's assigned here. So, if I have a MIDI controller set up, I can go and map my MIDI controller to that button. So on your controller, you can hit Command M, everything purple can be assigned to your controller. Click that guy, you turn a knob on the controller, and it's assigned to dry wet, which is really nice. Let's do one more. So maybe I definitely want to have control over the filter. So I'm going to right click, do map to macro 1. It's assigned to the frequency for the filter. And now I can kind of ride this, change this live. Right, and I'm starting to make this expressive sound. So it's just one sound, a couple effects, and I've got that. That's working for me, right? Now, let's go back to the question you asked before. So I had this Rhodes sound. When I played that, again, sometimes when you're in the studio, you just think of it as, for me, I'm doing recording acoustic drums, and I want to layer like an 808 with the kick. So I'll just bring in an 808. And then for the choruses, I probably want like a sub bass. So I'll bring in this operator thing, I'll play a sine, and I'll just play root notes. I'm not thinking of those as like one thing. I'm not thinking of them as one sound. I'm just playing parts, right? It's like being in a mixing console. I'm just playing all my parts into the individual channels. But from a keys perspective, you're going, okay, I want a pad, but I kind of want like an EP Rhodes piano thing mixed in. This is where Instrument Racks comes in. So we build our pad sound. We're great on that. Now I want to take this mellow piano, and I'm going to do two things here just to keep it really clean and straightforward. First, I'm going to group what we have here, and I'm going to call this delay EP, and I'm going to hit save. So I have this saved separate, right? It's all these modular bits. And then I'm going to take this delay EP, and I'll show you two things. So one, if I take this and drag it here on this track, watch what happens. It overwrites what I had previously, right? Because I dragged it to a track. If I Command Z and undo that, I want to take that same sound here, delay EP. I want to drag it. I'm going to hover over the track. You'll see it brings up our great pad sound here. And then if you look right here, Live has this message, drop an instrument or sample here. So I'm going to drop the instrument rack that I had selected right here. And you'll see what happened. It built a separate layer. So I have this layer, which is great pad sounds.
Could you do that one more time? I kind of. So you drag the track down into there?
Not the track. So if I try to drag the track, right, it's just going to keep moving.
Okay.
Right? It's just swapping. But what I did is I took the device or the devices that were grouped into one instrument rack to make this device called delay EP, and I dragged that device. And I just hovered over the track because, again, if I drop it, it overwrites, right?
Right.
But I'm going to take it and I'm going to drop it into the instrument rack. So as I hover, see how it says great pad, and then down here, drop an instrument.
Okay, so you never let go.
That's right.
Okay, gotcha.
That's right. Now, the other way to do this, if you manage your presets well and you're saving them over in the browser, what I could do is get in the great pad and go, man, I know I had that one sound the one time. I look up here, delay EP, and I drop this right in, right? So I can drag from the browser. I can drag from the track.
Gotcha.
So now the benefit of this, I have these two tracks here. I'm going to delete both of these guys. I don't need them individually anymore. I have just one sound, and then I'm going to save this sound and call it your really inventive made great pad plus delay EP. And now I know I have those two sounds combined. So now if I play it, and again, my track is armed here. That's nice, but it's kind of restrictive if I don't have control over the volumes. So easy way to fix this, I can go to the chain volume for each of these. I can right click, map this one to macro 2. Excuse me. And so I'm going to rename this, let's just do pad volume. Okay. And I'm going to go to delay EP, do the same thing here. Let's put it to macro 3. And we'll call this EP volume. And then the easy way to get to default, just kind of a little hack in Live. If I click on one of the faders or knobs, macros, and I hit delete, then what that's going to do is going to shoot me back to 0 dB. So now I have my sound. Right, a little too much EP. So I'm bringing it down. And I have this sound that's completely shapeable. I can morph between sounds, do all sorts of cool stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's convoluted, but it's like super cool. I get it. I think I'm getting it.
Yeah,
So now that means I don't have to have on my controller here. I don't have to have this key dedicated to this instrument, and this key dedicated to this instrument. I can just have this one key dedicated to both, but still have the ability to manipulate the volumes of both what's the word that we're using? Both the instrument
macros. Yeah,
macros. Okay.
and macros and instrument rack. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the way to think of it is, it's a, you're learning the language live speaks, and you're translating live from a studio environment, which it's perfectly capable in. It's great for producing. I have a lot of friends that produce all their music just purely in live. For me, I never was a Pro Tools guy. I never really got into Logic. Live is it for me. So I record, produce, sound design, use live for tracks, for keys, all that stuff. So we're taking the kind of studio concepts and trying to bring them to the stage to make it a little more usable. So now, and what I will say, not to discredit the idea, I was at a church a couple weeks ago, and they built their live sets. They had their stems open, and in between every song, they'd have the pad, keys player play a pad. The drummer would reach over here. He'd go double click, open a new live set. They'd press play. Get to the next one. You go over here, double click, open the new song, press play. And so they, instead of building one set, they were opening individual files. And so I kind of blew their minds when I said, well, just bring each song into one set. And you could do it their way, which is when you're recording a CD, you don't open a massive Pro Tools file and record every song in the CD in one set. But when you go on stage, you don't want to go open every Pro Tools file, like they were doing. You want to build it in one set, right? So translating studio concepts to the stage. And insert racks is a big way to make that happen. So, now, one other thing, again, we talked, insert racks can be a sound design tool, they can be a programming tool. So earlier, you remember we were talking about on this pad sound, right? We took the reverb and we put the reverb in the chain. It's serial processing. The cool thing about this, so there's instrument racks, there's drum racks, and there's audio effects racks and MIDI effect racks. So I can use an effect rack, an instrument rack, or particularly in this case, an audio effect rack or MIDI effect rack to kind of function like a return track. So I could take this reverb, and on the reverb, I can do Command G, and you'll see it puts the reverb in an audio effects rack. Right, you can open it up, you can see it. And there's a chain here, so it says reverb. I can right-click underneath here and do create chain. And what I create is a dry effect, right? A chain that doesn't have an effect on it. And then I have the reverb. And now when I play, it's a little hard to tell. But basically I have reverb at 100%. I have dry sound at 100%. And that's going to allow me to do that parallel processing within an instrument rack. So
right now we have an instrument rack, and within the instrument rack we have an audio effect rack that allows us to be able to get both a reverb and a dry signal.
That's right.
Gosh,
that's right.
Wow.
Now, and here's, and I'm going to take this out for a second just to try to simplify it. But one of the key concepts to live, and we're about to move into this to kind of wrap up talking about, we talked a lot about sound design, layers, chains as layers. I want to talk about chains as presets for a second. And this is where, we could go crazy deep with this. But the nice thing about this, and this is one of the concepts, I call it, it's kind of like the inception thing of live, because I can have racks within racks, within racks, within racks, within racks. So I can take a sound, and you saw we have 2 instrument racks, great pad sound, and delay EP within one instrument rack that we've called great pad plus delay EP, right? And you saw we could add an audio effect rack. We could add a MIDI effect rack. So possibilities are endless in order to make this happen. But let's talk about how to translate this to on stage just a little better. So you're already kind of getting it. Like, man, I could press this button and pull up both of these sounds as opposed to, the chef that's just throwing ingredients together, delay, or, EP pad. Because you run out of buttons eventually. When every sound is this individual thing, you've got to do a lot of thinking. And if you always want delay, EP, and pad together for this particular sound, then rack them up, put them in an instrument rack, make them that sound, right? And then you could have them separate too if you want. So we've talked about instrument racks as a sound design tool. Let's talk about them as a programming tool for a second. So I'm going to keep this sound. I'm also going to use this sound and this kind of came preset in an instrument rack already for me. And then this other sound, which again is in an instrument rack. They're not great, but it's going to work for now. So what I'm going to do is create a new MIDI track, which I could right click and do create new MIDI track. I could go up to the create menu up here and do insert MIDI track if I wanted. But you also see there's a shortcut here, Command Shift T. So I'm going to do Command Shift T, which creates a MIDI track for me. And then I would have put an instrument rack on that MIDI track. So I'm going to go up to Instruments, and you could double click to quickly close everything back up. And I just want to drag the default instrument rack. And the default instrument rack instrument has nothing in it. So I'm going to drag it right here, and you'll see it just loads up. No sounds, just says instrument rack, no chains, no devices on any chains. We're going to load some up here in a second.
Quick question. So, I don't know how to ask it. So, okay, so under the instrument that we just created, we also have all these clips. Do these instrument racks that we add at the bottom, are they based upon clips, or is it for the whole track?
So right now it's for the whole track. So and actually let me show you. Let's just kind of practically make this happen. So I'm going to name this, and I think this will answer your question. If not, holler here in a second and say, hey, that didn't make sense. So I'm going to rename this keys now for a second. I've got these 3 sounds. It's what we're using for the set this Sunday, but we need to make it a little easier. Instead of 3 buttons, I just want to basically have 1 button to make our set happen. So I named this instrument rack keys, and then we're going to remember, okay, Will said we can drag instrument racks within instrument racks. So I'm going to take this sound, low bit bounce. I'm going to drop it here. And again, I'm not letting go. I'm just dropping it in. You can see this is still called instrument rack. And let's name this keys to match our track. Okay, we have low bit bounce. And then I'm going to take this guy, a snow pad, same thing. I'm going to drop it right here below it. Now we have this layer or chain. And I'm going to take our final great pad plus delay EP and drop it right here. So now all my MIDI tracks are empty except for this master keys instrument rack we made. And now we have these 3 layers. So if I play right now, it's going to sound all sorts of crazy, right? Just awful. I'm treating instrument racks as a sound design tool. I'm treating chains as layers now. Layers that are all playing at the same time. But I may not want that to happen. I want to use chains to be presets now. I want to make it to where this sound plays in this preset, this one plays in this preset, this one plays this one. So what I'm going to do is go to this, and we're in chains here, right? So I'm going to make sure I press chains to view the chains. Within the chains, we have these 3 filters. It's a way to filter information. So key, if I press that, you're going to see these 3 kind of layers show up. So this is like on a keyboard where you can do splits. You can put bass in your left hand. You can play Rhodes in your right hand. The way I would do that is say, okay, I want this sound to play only in my left hand. So I'm going to just drag this to right there, C1 and below. Right, when I play that, we start to hear it. We could say a snow pad is only going to happen from C1 and higher. Great pad is going to happen here, right? So I just did a key split. It's all saved within that one instrument rack. The next time I drag this into a track, it comes with it, which is really nice.
Golly,
yeah.
So
we're yeah, and we're gonna breeze through some of these really quickly, but you're starting to see like whatever you want to do, you can do it, right? That's the benefit of live. At the front, it kind of looks maybe simple, or you're probably going, "No, it's simple," but it looks limited. It's just this thing, it's this shell. But you can do whatever you want to with it, which is crazy. So we can filter that incoming information by key. So we can split, we can do whatever. We can do the same thing with velocity. So you can make a piano patch that when you dig in really hard, then it plays delay sounds, right? When you play soft, it's really soft. Like sound design tool, it's amazing. But here's the one we really want to camp on for a second, is this chain select. So it's a really, really bad name for this, but we have chains, right? This is chain 1, 2, and 3. Right now, each of these are all in the same chain, right? The same chain selector. This orange thing is called the chain selector. So as I move this, it's going to say which chain is it going to play, which preset is it going to play. Right now it's on preset 0. You can see all 3 of these are lined up underneath each other. So they're all going to play at the same time, right? Which is what we have now. We don't want that. So I want to make these their own separate preset. So I'm going to drag this guy. And you see this weird looking line with 2 arrows pointing out of it. Just going to click and drag. And I'm going to put that in chain 1. The thing of it is preset 1. Put this one in chain 2. And then finally this one in chain 3. So now if I play, got everything ready to go, you're ready to start service, Matthew turns around, gives you the nod to play a pad, you play it, and nothing happens, right? And you get frustrated, you go, what the heck is happening? You go into chain, look at chain selector. It's because it's playing preset 0. There's no presets, there's no sounds, no chains assigned to that. So it's basically a mute group. That's what I think of chain 0 as. Move it to chain 1. Now we get our bass sound, which is drop an octave, right? Give our bass sound. I can go to chain 2. There's my pad. I can go to chain 3. All right, there's my pad in EP. Perfect. All our dreams are now possible, but we got to reach up and do this, right? And that's not very practical to say, all right, here's pad, and then I'm going to reach over here, move it to this one. And this is the cool thing about not cutting off the sound is now when I re-trigger it slowly fades out the other one into that sound, which again, awful sound, but fades out one into the other. But it's not very practical to reach up and do this, right, to use your mouse. Right. So what we can do, and this is where the controller comes in, is we can create MIDI clips and basically say, this clip is going to call up this chain, this clip is going to call up this chain, and this clip is going to call up this chain. So I'm going to go up here. Our way to create MIDI clips is just double click, right? And let's rename this. Let's rename this to match our patch. So let me just figure out what that is. Low bit bounce. So I'm going to name this low bit bounce. Our next one here, and I can stretch this track out, putting my mouse right to the right there. Drag it out a little bit. Let's name this next one a snow pad. And then our last one, great pad plus delay EP. Okay. And now we'll switch out. There we go. So I'm going to go back to low bit bounce. So what I want to do is go down here to this E, which is our envelope box. I'm going to click that. And you start to see, because the last thing, this is one of my favorite parts of live, the last thing I touched was that key selector. It's already pulled up in this box ready to go. So this is called our device chooser, which is what device do you want to automate? You see these 2 boxes whenever you do any sort of automation. What device do I want to automate? I want to automate the keys instrument back. What control do I want to automate on that device? And I want to automate the chain selector. So you see that already pulled up in this list here. So what I'm going to do for this first one, low bit bounce, I'm going to just go to this line. And this is just an automation line. And I'm going to double click to create what's called a breakpoint. And that's basically putting a pin on that automation point and locking it. And you see 1 showing up to say, this is preset 1. Okay. I'm going to go to our next patch here, a snow pad. And you see our line. And I'm going to just click and drag now. I'm going to drag it up and you see 2 pop up. Now that means I created a breakpoint. We're on preset 2. Go to this one, create a breakpoint. We're on preset 3. Okay. So now the cool thing about this, if we're still using our mouse, which is not the best way to do this, but we can click this guy. Trying to click off for a second. We can click on this guy. Oh, go down and block this. Right, there's our bass sound, which is awesome. Let's go to this pad. Right, now the benefit of this, I can click this other pad. It's still holding out the previous one, and now when I re-trigger it smoothly fades to that sound, right, which is really nice. But again, it's still not great. We're still not fully there. So what we could do, we can excuse me, do a couple things. I'll fast forward you through 2 scenarios real quick. So one, either using a MIDI controller like you guys have, or I'm just going to use the keys on my keyboard. I want to go and assign each of these clips. So I'm going to go up to this clip here, I'm going to click it and press 1, press 2 for this one, press 3 for this one. And now I'm going to say, okay, I want low bit bounce. So I press 1, go down to octave. All right, I'm going to go back to here. Let's press 3. Let's pull it great pad plus delay. All right, now I have that sound. Then press 2. Same deal. It's going to wait. And then we smoothly fade over to that. So that's one thing I can do. The other thing I can do that's pretty nice, there's a couple different ways to accomplish this, but I'll show you the next kind of easiest way. I can go in and actually, let's say these are presets that I've saved, okay? And they're down here. So again, like I said, Live's really flexible. So I'm going to call this presets. So everything below this point is all presets in my set. All right, let's just make it a different color. But up here are my 3 songs. So depending on what sound I want for the 3 songs, I'm going to choose that. So song 3, I need great pad plus delay. So I'm going to go and copy it, and then just click and paste. A snow pad, let's copy this one. Let's do it for song 3. Bounce, right? Now the benefit of this is we go to start our set. I'm going to press return. And as soon as I press return, I've got the sound. But if you notice, it went ahead and selected my next patch for me, my next song. So I just go ahead. So if you look, I'm pointing as if you can see me pointing at the screen. You look right where my mouse is here.
Yeah.
Right? I hit enter. It automatically jumps to the next song. So as I play, and you see this one is selected, but this sound is what's playing. Right? Or this one is highlighted, but this sound is what's playing. So then to go to my next song, all I have to do is hit enter again, and it's going to pick up that bass line, right? And then hit enter again, and it goes to that next song. It gives me that next pad sound. So the nice thing about this is you can automate this as much as you want to, and we can eventually talk about putting these in arrangement view and timing it with each part of the song, which is cool, although pretty intense. You could do that, or you could program your set up top and then have your presets down at the bottom like we did. Does that all kind of make sense? I know we did a lot there.
Yeah, it was a fire hose, but it was like a mad scientist created lot. This Ableton.
Yeah.
It feels a little like computer programming.
Yeah.
There's so much, but it's so awesome that all this can be done.
Yep.
It seems like it would have taken years to try to learn this on your own.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it, to me, it's all kind of modular concepts.
Yeah.
You learn one concept, and then you start to go, and you saw it already happening where you're going, oh, but could you? Yeah, absolutely. You just try the thing, you can do it. And so, good thing for you, I recorded all this, so you don't have to, you don't have to remember it. You could go back, and what I'll do is I'll post a YouTube link so you can go back, watch it however many times you want to. But what I would say is go back and just really dig into instrument racks, learn each of those pieces. And then it sounds a little silly, but just practice dragging in sounds, creating sounds, and then dragging those into instrument racks, saving them, pulling up those sounds, building like what I did here, building clips, automating. And as you start to get those concepts down, then I think at that point, then, let's connect again. Yeah. And then we just go, and you already get it. It is like a mad scientist. You get the bits and pieces. You can go wherever you want to with it, which is crazy.
Yeah, it looks like you can literally go anywhere. That's
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's probably a good, it's Matthew and I talked about this for a couple of weeks where we said, let's take 2 weeks, digest it. And then come back. I think that's a lot. And again, start with just insert racks, dig into that, and I think that will. There we go. I think that'll give you enough to get going and get those pieces, and then just from there, it's just some extra fun little things that just add and build on top of that, which is cool.
Wow, thank you so much.
Absolutely, and it was great to meet you, Cordaro, and. What I always tell Matthew, as you're going through this, just build a list of like, how do I, questions or kind of next things. And then, we can all connect whenever you guys feel like it makes sense to do another one. But
okay.
It was great to meet you and chat through stuff, and look forward to next time.
Again, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Talk soon.
Yeah, sounds good. Have a great night.
Thanks,
You
Will.
too.
See ya.
See you, Matthew. Take care.